Hey, all, Chicago here. What a week it has been. SBF charged on 7 counts. He's probably going to jail for a long time. The sentencing is in March, and we can all move on with our lives. We have a new show format I think you're all going to really like. We'd love to hear your comments on it. Without further ado, enjoy.
Welcome to Decentralized Dawn, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
Hello, everybody. Another exciting show. I am Chicago, and on my left...
It is left, indeed. Yes, it's. I don't know if it's stage left or not, but it feels left to me. And I'm Disco, so it's nice to be a part of the show. Excited to see what we covered this week.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. We are ripping the entire. We just redid the bathroom, and we're starting over. So we're going to do some fun formatting today, and we're playing around with the show to make it as fun as possible for us and obviously you as the viewer listener. So a lot of things will be familiar, the deep dives will be familiar, but we're gonna go deeper, maybe hit a little news and hit a decentralized take on it, and plenty of other surprises. So I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah. So we're kind of looking, we're looking at the right format, and we wanted to do something where we're able to be topical. So, we kind of have been thinking, let's just, as Chicago was saying, let's kind of rip the Band-Aid off and do a weekly show where we respond to some of the things in the news, because we're still going to be talking about those offline. So we might as well work them into the program was kind of the thinking on that. So it should be fun. It should be, I think it's going to be a great evolution, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And our takes are, we're not going to go into just news and give, the blow by blow of the SBF trial or the, what happened with Elizabeth Warren, but we are going to touch on things, especially as they relate to the bigger picture of kind of where we want to see the future of decentralization for our kids, our grandkids, and their kids. So
yeah, it's exciting stuff. That being said, we do want to focus on trying to bring some positivity to everybody every week. And, I think that's a well-needed kind of reminder, especially when you're in turbulent times, which I think pretty much everyone can admit that, there's a lot of things out there that we're not happy about. And it's tough to kind of just keep, getting that slammed in your face of all the negative things. So I wanted to start the show with a little something good in my life that I saw that was kind of just really, made me remember what's important and the purpose in things. And I don't want to get too into my personal and family life, or else that'd be a whole show. And then we'd be, doing a dad's podcast. But I guess I will slightly go down that road when I
pull out our pipes.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Let's rocking chair it out and remember the old lemonade commercials. But if
we're not that old, I don't know if we're being rocking chairs yet.
Yeah, but I did like the good old fashioned lemonade country time vibes. Like that always resonated with me. But
I remember it.
But looking over, I guess, whatever this shoulder is,
it's always the opposite. Why it's mirrored, I don't know. That's why I have to nod my head away from you to go towards you.
Yeah, exactly. And we're just, as I say, we're sitting down to breakfast with the show, so I'll get these things figured out over time, I promise. But there's a neon image behind me, and the origin story, so to speak, behind that was my daughter, who is a teenager. And if anyone goes through having teenage daughters, you celebrate the great moments that you share, because, they're going through some turbulent times, just kind of navigating, social media and everything every day. So you really want to make sure that you keep the lines of communication open. And you often wonder if you're being heard or if they're paying attention. And she gave me this neon sign because she said that it felt a lot like the Decentralized Dawn logo and spoke to her from that perspective. So when I got that from her, I melted, and I just wanted to kind of share that with everybody, because as I say, we do know that it's tough times out there. We're in a bear market. There's multiple wars. Who knows? We could actually be in World War III. People might come back and look at this as it. So I just, it is, you got to celebrate the positives that you see and kind of seek out gratitude. And I don't mean to be on a soapbox with that, but that's how I wanted to kick off the show, with something good there before we kind of move into the headlines and kind of talk
Yeah,
about
it's
some of the stuff.
beautiful. It's a very cool piece. I love the neon. There's something cool you could do by hiding it actually looks like that it's standing on top of that stand, which I know that's not a stand, and the wire goes below, and they're totally separate. But if that thing was perfectly like hidden in the wall, it would be really super awesome. And I think you can even go in the wall and come out by the plug, but that may be above your technical home pay grade.
Chicago, that that I'm not leading the pack when it comes to adoption and understanding of personal technology. So we'll leave that to the smarter folks. But it does, and I don't want to go off on a tangent with this too much, but like I really do like the essence of the neon. Yeah, I will. Who's gonna pull me off the stage, sir? But I do like the essence of the neon, and then it does speak. Like maybe I'll try to get the actual logo represented in neon, because I did always like we'll see. Stay tuned. Maybe the studio shall evolve over time. But
multicolored neon, that would be awesome. That's a lot of colors. I wonder what that would cost.
Yeah, we'll have to see as things go on. But anyhow, just wanted to share something positive from that side of it, and it's something we want to incorporate into the show and for our audience as much as we can.
Yeah, I think it's super cool, and yeah, there's going to be all positive vibes at the beginning and end of this show. So that's what your daughter did. It is a heart melter. Those are the moments for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's move into our first time kind of looking at the headlines. And just as a bit of a preface, again, we understand that people can get their news, and you can get it on your phone, and you're going to get fed whatever you kind of respond to, and we'll get into kind of the algorithms as the show goes on. But our approach in this segment moving forward is really to look at some of the headline stories of the week, but make sure that we look at them through kind of a decentral lens, right? So what does it mean from kind of a decentralization perspective? And one of the big stories within, kind of the overall business space, but also specifically tied to crypto, is the whole SBF case, which appears to be wrapping up today, or, going into jury. And, there's a million ways to look at it and hot takes and this or that, but we'd be remiss if we didn't even mention that it was happening. So let's kind of just what are your thoughts on it, Chicago?
Well, closing arguments were this morning, and I mean, he took the stand. He was advised not to, and I honestly, as someone who's been in crypto for a long time and have saw a lot of people get hurt by him, and when those dominoes fell, there were so many pieces that fell in so many places. And I remember when all this went down last year. Was that earlier this year? No, that was last year.
No, that was, we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that was right in the November of 2022 was when.
That's what I thought. Okay. If that was all this year, what a long year that would be. But a lot of people got wrecked, and I feel like as a crypto enthusiast and someone who loves decentralization, I was more and more kindly vocal with more normies out there, just telling them like, no, there's actually a lot of cool things about it. And I just feel like that it just set all of us back. A lot of people got burned by it. And, I knew, I'd been in before him and got most of my crypto from different places like Coinbase, which was, the first one around in the US, and FTX just came off as too glitzy. And when you actually listen to Sam be interviewed, like when he was with Eric Voorhees, he came off as a babbling idiot. He literally spoke in circles. And I think that worked for him well with reporters where he just wouldn't answer the question. But in a court of law, the judge was like, sir, let me remind you that you have to answer the question that's given. And that's when I think with the prosecution, he got very frustrated. So I want to see this wrapped up. I want to see him go to jail, and so our industry can stop talking about it and move on.
Yeah, I understand. And I think one of the other kind of interesting things to think about is, I think he was recruited, which is kind of odd, but I think he was recruited by one of the kind of founders of the effective altruism movement, because there was like this alignment with that. And it baffles me, this whole notion of, the effective altruism and trying to, justify, in his case, justify whatever he was doing by saying, well, at the end, I'm going to, give it all to the most people and, affect and impact the most change. But he really set that movement back to be, just as be Captain Obvious there, but who's lining up to get behind that. So on top
which he said was a complete lie. I think it came out in the court cases and even in news articles that he said that was all just PR BS. I watched that 60-minute piece on him, which I thought it was a pure fluff piece on him, but it wasn't. It was just that guy selling his book, but it was still that guy. They had no knowledge of cryptocurrencies, and they just it was poorly done, and 60 Minutes should be ashamed of producing a piece in that guy's book. No one in crypto, who's going to buy that thing?
Not me.
Yeah. We already know the kid's kind of nuts, but that's a good point of the effective altruism. So what did you learn about that?
Well, I was reading a little bit, trying to figure out, what the connection was. And from what I can tell, it happened early on, and it was almost like they scouted him to be, involved. And it just makes me to take a step back from that. It just makes me look at it from how gullible, really the centralized powers that be are. And I don't just mean the entertainment industry that, had no problem, doing ads for FTX and going to visit him in the Bahamas, and stories of him and Tom Brady really had a great relationship. Brady respected him. And then you have, he's got all these friends within, Capitol Hill and all this stuff. So it's are there really any guardrails if you can have a new product and you have a flashy way to do it, and you can pay people, millions of dollars for 30 minutes of work and
pay people allegedly with the funds of your depositors, run Super Bowl ads, get Tom Brady, those deals with Steph Curry and Tom Brady were for 20 hours a year for 65 million, 35 million, again, allegedly, but those we believe were all depositors' funds that they just took to give away. And and I think that's why he thought he was so invincible. It's just, and maybe the Kid Icarus story just repeats itself over and over, but what a douche.
Yeah. And it's, we talked about it a little bit, when we did an episode on kind of the birth and evolution of decentralization and the movement overall. And it's just how much hubris can these people have? And how can you how can you sleep at night knowing that you're doing this? And, I'm not a physicist, but every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're doing all this and, pocketing and playing dirty or whatever, you're hurting people. And I don't know, maybe as a more mature person, I have trouble, if I feel like I shortchange someone, in a tip jar, I'll feel bad for a month over it. And I just don't understand this capacity to be hey, whatever, man, I'm going to give it all back. So it's all justified.
In that 60 Minutes piece, basically with effective altruism, I feel like he thinks he could just raise the fields and just do as bad and terrible as stuff as possible because he's going to give it all away at the end.
You know what? I don't like to call BS, but I call BS because you know what? He also bought the Bahamas essentially and turned it into a hedonistic playground. And, he was playing with people with how he was talking and dancing around, answering questions. He was playing this, kind of riled up, eccentric genius who's the smartest guy in the room and has figured all this out, when essentially he just set up an exchange and milked money from one account to the other and was playing around with it. And he got caught. And I feel
and they all turned on him, right? Everybody turned on him, and the Tom Brady's and the Steph Curry's, obviously they're for 35 million, I don't blame them. Maybe they're a little into crypto, and Sam offers that. They're sure, I'll take it. And, obviously, everyone's your best friend when you're the eccentric billionaire. But when they find out you screw people, they all disappeared, I assume, except for his family and maybe the people he greased somewhere, allegedly greased, who feel like they need to help him a little. I feel like everybody's abandoned him. And I got to say, there's almost a little bit of pity in there, but not much, because he set our whole industry back so much, and a lot of the big institutions who are plugged in to TradFi have. And that's very frustrating because at its core, it's immutable. You own your own hardware wallet and, we move on. And I never interacted with the guy. I never got burned by him, thank God. But I got burned by just being in the industry because of the what people thought of the industry.
Yeah. And what you said before resonates with me as well, which is, there were a lot of people at that time who were entering the space or were putting in, money that they really couldn't afford to necessarily lose. And they were doing it for reasons that they thought they could, help their families or put themselves in a different position. And it's just painful to watch and see kind of the carnage from, just massive ego and it not being checked and kind of just playing loose and dirty and getting away with it for as long as he did. So justice should be served. We'll see how that goes. It was Halloween this week, and I didn't necessarily understand that Halloween also represents the birthday of the original Bitcoin white paper. So, just
15 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's remarkable to look back on. And, we've talked about it in other shows, but 15 years is nothing in the course of history and in the course of developments and transitions and things from that perspective. So it's really kind of remarkable to kind of just level set and be like, holy cow, this was a white paper 15 years ago. And look at all that's transpired on that side of it and how much it's grown. And, I just say kudos to the folks that got into it and understood it and got fascinated. And, I'm of the mindset of the more the merrier. I'm newer into the space, and I certainly have
the merrier. Chains or
just the more interest and the more people want to come in and go down the rabbit holes and get exposed and kind of get the bug and get, that, because you're ultimately bringing more minds into the space who can come up with different ways to build and come up with different solutions and ways to maximize. So I just thought it was definitely worth mentioning. And I do think it's a good kind of just a check-in point to be like, this didn't even exist, 16 years ago. And to see, the evolution to date is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And then one last little interesting thing, and we'll get more to this in later episodes, but decentralization in education is huge. And I think it's going to get bigger and bigger, especially with universities and the costs of what parents have to pay for their children to go to school and the loans that are taken out. It's just absurd. But Disco and I last, I believe October, November, we took a class from Nic University out of Cyprus. It was Metaverse 511 class, and we're very excited, but soon there will be an Ethereum on-chain mint from Punk 6529, and he's been working on this thing like a year, and he's apologized profusely, but I think once we get it, we'll be extremely happy. I think there's only about 200 of us who actually, there was probably several thousand, maybe 6,000 who took the course, but only, and maybe a couple thousand who took the test, but then you did have to pay 0.25 ETH to, once you pass the test, to mint the certificate. And that window closed, I believe, end of last year, beginning of this year at some point, or this spring. So we've been waiting a long time, but to have an immutable certificate that we passed a course about NFTs, and I thought, being in crypto a long time, I'd ace that test, and I think I did good. I got like 88, but some of those it was open book, and I'm like, this is hard, but it was educational, and I learned a lot.
When I hear open book, I'm like, it's a breeze. And then I sat down, I was like, had a little sweat on the brow. I was in the mid 80s. I don't think I had your number, but I focused, and I think it's interesting. We did a show, where Chicago kind of walked everyone through, what NFTs are truly on chain and everything. And from what Punk 6529 saying, this is going to be generative and it's going to be fully on chain. So I think that what you were saying, like, we might have backdoored into some scarcity because not a lot of people opted in for the actual buy-in of the cert. So stay tuned. We'll be sure to show you and share, the audience when we get these, just to see what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's not many, but also he's going to use that same technology and on-chain technology to do the future of the 6529 memes as well. So that one will be pretty neat. The only asterisk in this whole thing is that, remember, he kept saying that Nic University out of Greece has been minting certificates on Ethereum and Bitcoin since 2014. And the only thing I can think of is that's before ordinals. I kind of want to see what's there, like I'd love to honestly collect one of those, because this one certainly will be the first of a new era and generation and size and collaboration, but it is not the first. I'd be curious what these old certificates, they're probably simple looking, they're not generative art included, but they are there, which is interesting if you like to try and collect things that are older, and are they on chain or are they pointers to off chain? So that's one area I'd like to explore and maybe get one.
I never would have been cognizant of asking the question of if it's pointer or on chain had we not gone through this journey. So it's building on itself, and I love it. So that's fascinating. And again, we may do like an entire show deep dive just on kind of the prospects of decentralized education utilizing some of this on-chain stuff, because we like to look at what's broken and see how it can be fixed and iterated and improved, and blockchain certainly facilitates some of that potential. So we'll be looking at that as well.
And viewers too, like if you have ideas for where to sniff for decentralization, whether it's interviews or topics, please leave comments, let us know, subscribe and all that fun stuff. We're older, we hate asking for all that, the subscribe button, but honestly, like if you have ideas, we are all ears, because we want to grow this with our audience.
One thing we wanted to do each week is to have some view of the volume of what's happening in the market. So I think that we'll kind of transition into that and take a look at a few different areas of, and again, we want to focus more on the volume side of things as opposed to price action and So this is kind of our maiden voyage, taking a look at this, a field trip, if you will.
Yeah, I'm not satisfied with all the charts that I found yet, and we're gonna find something that's perfect. And I think I'm just gonna make my own charts so I can hide the price. I honestly, like what Disco said, the price, I think, for people in this industry and really for interest of topic is probably the least interesting thing that there is, because price will follow everything else. It'll follow volume and builders and what's going on chain. So we really want to focus more on volume. So one that I found from I don't even know what site this is. What is this? This is CoinMarketCap. I liked this one because I could actually like customize my volume as we look at it. But one thing to note, like globally, so many of us, it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, and, for volume for the past 30 days, and those were 2 and 3. But I think what a lot of people forget is that Tether and just people globally, getting out of super inflationary currencies and just going into Tether, what an underpinning that is. So Tether did 736 billion in volume in the last 30 days. It's just incredible, the amount of money. And, it's probably a lot of the same Tether moving around a lot, but it just goes to show you like how prevalent that is all over the world. And most Tether transactions happen on Binance, which, is the biggest exchange in the world outside the US. So, you go to number 2, and that's Bitcoin at 447 billion in a 30-day volume. Obviously, with the ETF coming up, that's a big number, and it's been up. Like I said, I'm going to get some charts that show the volume kind of over time in different looks. And then Ethereum is number 3 at 197 billion. So just under half of what Bitcoin is. But, Bitcoin's more than half a Tether, but barely, right? So, I mean, that just shows you what a global perspective, putting that lens on it, is for all of these coins. Because I prefer Bitcoin and Ethereum here personally, but a lot of people use Tether actually, and I believe USDC on Tron.
Tron keeps popping up in a lot of places, and we'll pay attention to it, and as the weeks go on, we'll make sure to kind of understand what's happening with that.
Yeah, exactly. So the other one that I really like, and I actually love this one, is Crypto Slam. And this is blockchain NFT volume. So now we're not looking at total volume, we're just looking at NFTs. As you can guess, for the last 7 days, Ethereum is leading the charge with a total of 131 million in NFT sales. But just look at the wash percentage of Ethereum. It's 57%. So wash trading is probably mostly happen on blur.io, right? And
Right.
that's just people trying to mine blur tokens and wash trading. So one could say that those without the wash trading would not be happening, which takes, Ethereum down to what, about 65
Nice.
billion for the week, right? You got
That's
Solana at number 2 at 8 billion, very little wash trading there. And what I also found interesting, if you go down to Bitcoin, that's about 7.2 million, no wash trading there, but a lot of that money is BRC20 tokens, or tokens off of Bitcoin and not NFTs. The only other interesting fact here is that on Polygon, which is obviously an L2 of Ethereum, the wash trading is super high there. So if you want wash trading, it's Ethereum, but Ethereum NFTs came there first, and that's where obviously the action is. But I'd be interested
and
to
then
see if this wash trading ends by next year, the year after. I mean, how long can you be wash trading blur?
yeah, I thought that would have kind of been tailed off by now. And then Immutable X is probably, that's the gaming side of it, I would think. So you're not going to have anything there. And then what's Mythos? Or that's up there pretty high.
Yeah, so Mythos is for gaming, and we're gonna look at that
Okay.
later. But Mythos is its own chain. But again, it shows we're forcing ourselves to look at chains other than Ethereum and Bitcoin, our favorite too, because there's a lot going on in different chains, and multiple chain world is a decentralized world, right? So,
Yeah.
like I said, I never loved Tron, don't love it, but if that's the easiest, least friction way in countries with extremely high inflation rates to get into the US dollar, which obviously comparatively is not inflating, it becomes more valuable to them. If that works for them to get into it, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what makes most sense for them. And the Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystem, I hope that those can be prominent in these places as well, because I don't love everything about Tron, but sometimes people go where the least friction is.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do, of course, is be nuanced and take a look at it. So we have to look at our own potential bias. And, if we're just taking only looks at, Bitcoin and Ethereum and emphasizing that and not taking a look at the larger kind of look at it from a global perspective, as you say, like there's a lot of different motivations for people to utilize different tools that are available to them. So that's interesting to kind of look at it from that perspective for sure.
Yeah. And the last chart that we'll look at this is NFT collections rankings by sales volume. So it's all chains. So Bored Apes at the top, that's what you'd expect. It only takes a couple transactions to get up there. Let's go to 7 days. Let's get a little better perspective. But so 171 Bored Apes sold to put them at number 1. But look at Mythos with D-Market at number 2. So yeah, we'll definitely research that, and if we think it's important, then we'll share so we can branch out. CryptoPunks, Mutant Apes, and then you go down to number 9. That's the only other one I would say with BRC20 tokens, which off just main Bitcoin transactions they've really made volume on the chain, and obviously miner rewards and
Yeah.
what the miners get, it's taken it way up. So Bitcoin ordinals and BRC20 has really not only brought new developers to the Bitcoin ecosystem, but it's also really helped miners as well. So I think a busy chain is a good chain. So that's a huge win-win.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we'll continue to figure out what to take a look at from this. But again, trying to just look at the volume side of it and see if there's any stories that we want to kind of dig deeper on, behind the numbers and see what's making sense there. Another thing that we want to get into is kind of celebrating people who are on the forefront, who have been on the forefront of, kind of the entire decentralized movement. And we just want to take a moment and kind of look at things. and maybe a person or an action or something from the week or over the course of time. And we could have covered this a little bit in Decentral Lens in the headlines, but I think it makes sense to kind of talk about it here and talk about, what Nic Carter was doing out there this week. So just to tee it up a little bit from a general perspective, there's been some scuttlebutt, so to speak, between the Wall Street Journal and the crypto community, and basically and how Elizabeth Warren specifically was utilizing information from the Wall Street Journal to kind of malign the crypto space and movement within, the halls of Capitol Hill. And it got to the point where everyone's like, I don't think what you said was even true. And it turns out that a retraction was needed.
Yeah.
And in Chicago, tell me a little bit about how Nic Carter stepped into that equation.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. So Nic Carter stepped in and basically said, look, I have a bunch of $500 grants. It started at, I think, 16 or some number. And he just kept getting more funding from folks out there. So I think the number went all the way up to 32. So people could go out there as a bounty, do their research and see, like, is this $131 million number that Hamas supposedly got in cryptocurrency, was that number right? And it turns out already we know the Wall Street Journal kind of blinked and the retraction was not very strong. And it actually left me more confused than before. But, huge shout out on the decentralized front to Nic Carter, because mainstream media, there's a lot of great reporters out there, but there's a lot of, crypto is the first time where I had such a deep knowledge and I was so into something where mainstream media was portraying it as something that I knew not to be accurate on many, many, many fronts. And it seemed almost like coordinated and organized. And it was it's been very disheartening. And the fact that, now with social media and X, probably more specifically, that people with big followings can do these bounties, who have more means or who have access to a group of people with more means to challenge mainstream media to find the truth. Because at the end of the day, the rest of us, the people out there every day, we just want the truth, because if we have to take everything with a grain of salt and really keep our kind of critical thinking hackles up for every single thing we read, A, that's exhausting, but B, it makes you not want to trust anything. And I think other countries, like, with all the psyops I'm sure that we do overseas and that countries obviously are trying to do to us, it's not even sowing revolution. It's just sowing uncertainties and trying to wedge in that lack of trust. So
I agree. The whole notion of, we talk about mainstream media, that could basically be subsetted into centralized media, right? And then to have centralized political powers that be utilizing that data that is not even correct to further a narrative, to position for tighter regulations that aren't really thought out. Like, it's just a big bowl of ickiness, It's like, oh my goodness. So kudos to Nic for kind of fighting that fight. And it is representative of a truly decentralized way of forcing critical thinking and kind of a judgment and a call out to the centralized powers that be. So I think it's a pretty true and accurate representation of what can be done.
Yeah. And he really rallied the troops, and a lot of other people, Ellipse got in there and has reached out to the Wall Street Journal. They're the ones where the research first kind of came from. And they were like, that's not what we said at all. Chainalysis said this is inaccurate. And the number, I think they said 130 million. I think it's coming out to be roughly like 400,000 or something. So obviously every dollar or every ounce of crypto that goes towards terrorism, that's horrible, and we don't want to have that. But I mean, think about like the US dollar and probably cash and funds there. Like, who knows what those numbers are. So
And
I think,
not even to think just of this case, but what scares the daylights out of me is
yeah,
policy decisions are being made on data and information that's not being vetted. So,
that's
whoa,
not,
like
that's
zoom out on
erroneous.
that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, 100 Congress people signed that letter. Like, now that they know this, are they going to retract that? Is that even possible? Like, Elizabeth Warren she back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, she used to go after the banks and kind of, it seems like she was for the people. And now it feels like she's more entrenched with the banks, as has been a senator for a long time now. But we're not going to get into huge political ramifications here, but I guess I just wish this crypto and cryptography is a very cutting edge industry, but it's also a very necessary industry to create more transparency for, like we said, education, for finance, and for government. Like, at some point, dare to dream if we had more, like, you could see how your money flowed into, I'm happy to pay taxes, but I'd like to know where it goes, and I'd like to have smarter people than me make charts on diagrams over time of where that money is spent, so we can get smarter and more efficient as a country. So blockchain is an underpinning functionality for society. That's why we're so passionate about this.
I know. Could you imagine going to Etherscan to see where your tax return went to?
Oh my God. That would
wouldn't
be awesome.
Yeah, and it's not that far off, it. And I don't want to get.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, and I don't want to get political, but it's a somewhat of a political topic, and it's been politicized. And you want people in there that at least understand the capabilities of new technologies instead of being afraid of them and trying to squash it. And I guess that's kind of the net. So again, each week we want to try to find, someone to kind of shout out and say kudos and good job. And we appreciate kind of the efforts for the greater decentralization movement. So that was interesting to discuss for sure.
So Nick, thank you.
Yeah. Salute. The emoji salute is going towards you right now.
All right, so let's transition to the main feature. I'm excited about this. So we're going to do 2 mini deep dives now. Our first main feature is on Gemini. Disco. Ooh. I know you've got a history with them, and what I've learned is it all took place in a very short period of time. But let's go into Gemini. What's going on with them?
Well, I just want to tee this up that I want to walk through my personal experience with this. And I guess I have to be slightly careful, but I'm not really that worried because
for those listeners who've never, don't really know who Gemini is, tee it up also like who they are and give kind of the overview, please.
Sure. So when I started in, crypto, so to speak, and when I dipped my toes into crypto, I started working with Coinbase initially, as Chicago said, that was kind of out there, but I couldn't get access to some of the projects that I was interested in. So Gemini at the time was another exchange. So, and it's based in the US. And, I was looking at that, and they really positioned themselves as, a super buttoned up operation. And, I felt like all of the messaging and the positioning was really like, we're cut above, and we might not be the biggest, but we're growing in the way that we want to be. And I guess the elephant in the room is that it's owned by, the Winklevosses, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and they are famous or infamous for kind of their relationship to the movie The Social Network and, the founding of Facebook. And, they did end up getting a settlement from what I understand. I don't know all the intricacies of the timeline and everything from that perspective, but I know that they were involved with the impetus of the origin of Facebook, and that they interfaced with Zuckerberg, and then there were some lawsuits, and that's how that all went out. And they did end up forming Gemini as an exchange. So I was working primarily, I had most of my assets in Coinbase, and this was all like, there's a timeline of all this was going on that can kind of help, tell the whole story. So it goes back to the SBF stuff, and it was just this November that all the walls kind of came crashing down, and all kind of came together at the same time. And a lot of it was tied to, FTX and Binance and how that went through. So I'll just walk through it really quick. On November 6th, Binance sells all of its FTT tokens. And if you were in the space, then you were like, what is going on? And it felt like super dramatic, and you just didn't really understand it. Then FTX announced that there was a liquidity crisis and said they needed to get a bailout. And then Binance was like, CZ was saying that he was going to buy all of FTX's non-US business. And
Yeah, that was very short-lived.
yeah, you didn't know. And then all of a sudden it was like the next day, literally like, okay, no, we're not. And like the little head fake there. Right. And then, as we said before, like FTX was set up in the Bahamas at that point. And, I don't understand the Bahamian government and how that works, but they stepped in and froze FTX's assets. And then like the next day, SBF, it's hard to, FTX and SBF, it kind of goes back and forth, right?
A lot of initials.
What's going to happen to my funds and what should I be doing? So that was my first foray into pulling assets off of centralized exchange and moving them to a ledger at the time. And I loved the idea when I got into the space of passive income. So I was always very interested in staking and the value proposition from that. So I had most of my stuff was doing some form of staking through a central exchange. I pulled everything off and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to weather the storm. I'm doing what, kind of the wiser people in the space are saying to do, like get off the exchanges and hold your assets there. And then I got an email like in the middle of all this from Gemini. And in that email, they were saying, we're different essentially. If you could click on that, bottom link, then it should go right to the email, the actual email. And there's just a lot of stuff in this email that, didn't age well, so to speak. They were talking about how Gemini has no exposure to FTT or Alameda. Then it goes into saying Gemini is a full reserve exchange custodian. All customer funds are held one-to-one, available for withdrawal at any time. Gemini is highly regulated. At any given time, Gemini is required to hold capital in excess of customer deposits. And then they sign it with this onward and upward, from Cameron and Tyler. And me getting that email at that point prompted me to take an allocation of what I had already moved to the Ledger wallet back to Gemini and to stake. So I'm like, oh, well, at least these, this is buttoned up. Then I can still do some of this and make sense of this and kind of ride this all out. Fast forward to the next day when I felt kind of queasy because I was just looking at all the news and I'm like, this all just feels like it's not worth, the X% return I'd be getting off of staking. I want to just pull everything back onto the ledger and kind of weather the storm.
I guess before you even get there, this line right here is to me like, all customer funds held on Gemini are held one-to-one and available for withdrawal any time. Like they did this amidst literally the FTX building burning. They just happened to have your email. They got you. They sent it and they literally were like, hey, don't worry. There's a safe haven and you can earn interest on this and you can get it. It's one-to-one, which means there's no leveraging at all, and you can get it back whenever you want. And
you're right. And everything that you said and that they said there was counter to the narrative of what was happening with the troubles, right? So it was like, oh wow, they're really kind of the anti for this. Like that's the right. So they were positioning themselves as this different sort of safe haven, and that's where kind of I have my issue with this whole thing was the timeliness of sending that saying, hey, we're kind of this oasis. We know all this nasty stuff's going on, but look at us. And then as it turns out, I go to try to withdraw the next day and I get this email, this generic email saying, thanks for reaching out earlier today. Genesis announced it's pausing all withdrawal of funds. What? And then as a result, we'll be pausing our earn program as well. And this is the kicker right here, is Gemini earn funds are held by Genesis and lent via a service level agreement between the customer and Genesis, with Gemini acting as an agent. We understand you'll have questions, blah, blah, blah. And so they put that kind of fine.
So this is the first time Genesis
Was
ever
mentioned in my life. Like, when you opted into the earn program, there was no mention of Genesis that was, able to be seen. It might have been buried in retrospect. I take ownership of the fact that I fell for it and that I didn't do enough research on it, but it sticks in my craw, the opportunistic nature of this unsolicited, hey, we're a safe haven email that prompted my action to move funds into something. And then the very next day, after not having a good feeling in my stomach about it, being like, sorry, it's locked. And by the way, we know you'll have questions, but we'll keep you posted on how things go. And again, the last thing that got me real mad, they signed it with onwards and upwards again. It's like,
I mean, look at this. Like, I just went back to the letter that they wrote. It says Gemini is a full reserve exchange and custodian. A full reserve, this means that all customer funds held on Gemini, and I know I already had that one highlighted, but it's saying that they are a full reserve. Now, I guess it doesn't say Gemini earn is a full reserve, but it's like they're kind of making, that's the assumption if they're sending this to you. Why would they say all this stuff about we're a full reserve if they had it somewhere else? This whole messaging to me is saying we've got the money here. It's 1-to-1. Basically, we're not leveraging it. So whenever you need it, we've got it 100%. Like,
yeah. And the way the earn program was embedded into the platform, it wasn't as if you left the platform to go to earn and there was any acknowledgement you were doing anything outside of Gemini. So then when you get the positioning of saying Gemini earn is, oh, well, that's actually Genesis, so that ain't us. We'll fight for you against Genesis, but stay tuned. It really just left me upset, and then again, this onward and upward, it's just so in tune with where people are coming
yeah,
from.
you know what it is? It's like the politicians, how they all look like they're communing with a higher being to pass this information to you, with like the American flag or some sort of patriotic thing behind them. Like, this just to me reeks of certainly inauthenticity and inauthenticity, and downright it feels allegedly like a lie to me.
Yeah.
Or at least a manipulation of what they were actually offering. So when you first heard about Earn is Gemini's brand name for this thing, even though Genesis, which
Correct.
is DCG and GBTC, same company there, or same parent company, was actually managing this whole thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't transparent at all. I will say that from a user perspective. It was, oh, hey, those prompts when it's like, oh, you have, X Ethereum, put it here, or, use the earn program to earn an extra 4% on your holding or whatever. And it's like, okay, click. And you just opt in. There wasn't like a separate opt-in page that was like, reading. I don't even feel like I ignored any fine print because I was so early in my journey. Like, I didn't want to get, kind of gotcha'd on anything. So I was pretty diligent in terms of trying to explore. And actually me going back into it shows that I was trying to be diligent, and my ears were up at that point because of all the FUD and everything that was going on. So,
right. So you figured it out, but you figured it out like a day late, 2 days late. When do you think?
Literally the next morning, I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't feel good about this. Like, I'm just going to pull it. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm blocked. Like, I can't.
So your gut was right. And unfortunately, everybody else's gut was right. What was going on at Genesis behind the scenes? Like, what happened?
That's what this whole thing has turned into now, right? Is I don't even know, like, it goes into the DGC and Genesis and, they're insolvent, and they were all, it seems to me that they were a lot of the different exchanges and a lot of the different lending, protocols were utilizing, these companies behind the scenes. And, it all kind of came to light not ironically, about the same time as the liquidity started having be an issue with FTX overall. So I think, probably they were involved with FTX. Again, this is more, kind of the legalese side of it that I don't really understand all the intricacies of, but I know that the move now from the Gemini side is that there's lawsuits against Genesis, and they're pushing for Genesis to earmark the funds to make the earn people hold. And Genesis is trying to just put it all into their overall bankruptcy portfolio, so to speak, and not to prioritize making sure that the earn people get their money back. The other frustrating thing that I would just say is you have the owners of Gemini now going around and being like, we're, worldwide advocates for crypto, and we're, doing a world tour and sponsoring things and doing this, and knowing that that they purchased, Bitcoin at $10 a coin and have over 70,000 Bitcoin at least. I don't understand why you wouldn't feel like you would just, even as a loan or something, just make your earn people whole. It would be a drop in the bucket. And
do you know how much earn, what the total number was?
I should have that. I want to say it's like 1 point something billion, but it's not even, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much. And that's what's so frustrating, is that they appear to be just waiting it out in the courts and hiding it out in the courts. And I just don't think they ever really want to, acknowledge, that they were involved in any way that was, suspect. But again, my big point in this is, I'm not a lawyer. I accept responsibility for not, doing all of my research on that and getting burned in it. But the thing that sticks with me, and why I wanted to bring it up for folks, is I think the timing of that email is what just really, really, that's just, it's hard for me to, make peace with the fact that while all this is going on, you shoot out an unsolicited email talking about how everything's, backed 1-to-1, and that we have Gemini. If you go further down, it's like Gemini is fully regulated, all these little buzzwords that at that point, specifically in the ecosystem, like, okay, they're fully regulated. Oh, it's 1-to-1. It's all there, and then to the next day be like, sorry, folks, park's closed. It's actually these guys. Genesis is a problem, not us. It's like, well, thanks. And, I don't have a wrap up on it. They say that, I was just looking at, they do this update supposedly every week, but it's not necessarily every week, to be honest with you, about what's happening with the court cases and stuff like that. And this is a screenshot of the most recent update, and earn users should receive the full benefit of the first tranche. Again, I don't understand.
Yeah, they're talking about tranche 1 and tranche 2, which reminds me of 2008 and the whole mortgage-backed securities and the junk and the different tranches. It's just fancy words, which I never ever like to use. And isn't the state of New York or the SEC, they're going after both DCG and Gemini, correct?
I believe so, but again, allegedly, I don't know the legal side of all of it, but I just know that it felt disingenuous, and that I got kind of, I'm upset because of how it was positioned. I take responsibility for it, but it is frustrating, if I was in a position and I did learn early, to only invest what you can afford to lose and not have access to. And thankfully that was the case. But I just think of all these other folks that's coming right into the holiday season, and, they're thinking about, I'm going to try to do this to help put my family in a different position and, set myself up and my kids for the future. And then, you get that, as I said, that old National Lampoon, sorry folks, the park's closed. And I haven't had access to those funds for, well over a year, or, up to a year. And I didn't opt in to want to just be part of a lawsuit against a bankrupt company that was mismanaging, and misrepresenting what they were doing. So it's really, I just find it really icky. I've said that a few times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds like you're not alone out there. I know a lot of people have been burned by this, and it just, their timing was in all the FUD and all the fallout of FTX to get money, it feels like. But yeah, Letitia James, New York Attorney General, basically they are huge lawsuit against them. Genesis, Gemini, and all the affiliates, which is DCG, right? So if New York's going after them, that's generally where it happens, right, in those circuit courts. So it will be interesting to see how this unfolds, and we'll learn a lot. But it's just in a decentralized world, this stuff shouldn't happen. And, I think now this, obviously you wouldn't make the same mistake twice, but I don't think this would happen to you now, and that's what we want newer listeners or people just getting into crypto to understand, that you can hold your own keys, you can be your own bank, you can stake your own Ethereum and make, 3.4% a year by staking and securing the system. So there's a lot of ways to do it decentralized without having to be at the mercy of these centralized players, because all the problems we've had have been because of over leverage or kind of alleged greed to, kind of shake the ETH and Bitcoin and whatever they can from people. And maybe that's not how the intention started, but that sure feels like what this is.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I believe the outstanding number is 900 million. So earn users are out. I believe it's 900 million.
Okay. So that's just under $1 billion. Okay. And like you said, with 70,000 Bitcoin, I can't do the math that fast, but that's what, like hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah. So again, I feel like I wanted to share that story just, as people are getting into the space. I want everyone or people that have been in the space, like it really does, kind of bolster up some of not the cliches, but the rallying cries of not your keys, not your crypto. Like it's I fully believe that now. And I learned that lesson by going through this process. And, I don't have any assets right now that are not on a hardware wallet from going through this. So ultimately, I think I'm bullish, and I guess I'm a bull from that perspective, but I'm bullish the right thing will happen. And I'm bullish that I'll get that money back. But I do think that this story is not really being shared enough just for people to understand. Like, you can't really trust everything. The whole point of the decentralization, and the thing that's really the magic part, right, is when you have that, wallet and you're like, it's here and this is mine. Yeah. And, I can go anywhere with this. And that's kind of just really one of the big value propositions from this movement overall. So
it is the best feeling in crypto for sure. So I'm going to share something fun here, about Twitter, or now we call it X. Like, one thing about decentralization that we've talked about in our last couple shows is how decentralized, obviously we've gone from 3 TV networks, in the 50s, 60s, 70s to a 4th TV network, and then to cable, to hundreds of channels. So you could have more voices, but that was still one way, right? You still had to have a satellite in the air to have a cable network like MTV. But now, fast forward to social media networks. Now it was a two-way street. But what has fascinated me about social media is it's given way more of us a voice. I mean, look what Nic Carter did. He's an advocate for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, and wants the truth out there, and not what the politicians and mainstream media say, especially if their base premise is not factual. So I looked at X this time, Twitter for most of you, to see what it's like in the life of a prominent Twitter user with a lot of followers and a lot of clout. So I call it the life of the influencer. And thank you to Dali for making this beautiful picture of the Twitter bird in a cage where the door is wide open, yet the bird seems to stay in this golden cage. And I want to see why.
And the image just wouldn't work the same with an X inside of the cage.
No, it wouldn't. Yeah. So when I gave Dali the AI prompts, I said make it resemble the old Twitter bird, because I think that's what most of us still associate with it. So, there's a lot of interesting things here, and my take has it's changed in some ways and hasn't in other. But let's just look first through the lens of the life of an influencer. Okay. So basically, the first thing you want to do is have consistency when you tweet. Roughly 2 to 4 tweets a day. You don't need to be tweeting 30 or 40 times a day. Some people probably do tweet a lot, but you don't need a ton. So it's 2 to 4 tweets a day. Obviously, quality is important because there's so many people on the platform that tweet. They just want to make sure that your stuff is good. So consistency is first and foremost. But this is what's interesting. So Twitter/X, we'll just call it X from now on, they showed their source code as of March. So Elon, when he came in, he promised that they would share the source code, and they did. And obviously this part is an old story, but it's just worth a reminder what gets more boost for your tweet and what doesn't. So if you get likes on your tweets, that's a 30 times multiplier. And when I say multiplier, it's how likely is that tweet to kind of go out of your own little following and ecosystem, or really, is it going to reach your own ecosystem and your followers? And is it going to go possibly even beyond that and go to like recommended tweets or on the homepage? So likes get 30 times, retweets get 20 times. So a like, which seems surprising. That was kind of the first aha for me. A like. So, when you're scrolling Twitter, you could tap on that like button. It's almost like without thinking, your brain almost is just like, oh, that's cool. And, hopefully you've read the whole thing or whatever they posted, but you've liked it right away. And maybe that's kind of the secret sauce because you did it quickly. Your gut, almost before thinking brain said thumbs up. I like it. Right. So the retweet, which I thought would be a far higher one, that, that's still high, but it's only a 20x. So when you're writing tweets, you want to think about that stuff. So having an image or a video, people love pictures and the timeline is built for pictures. And if you have an image or video, that's a 2x multiplier. So now, one of the big ahas here too, it's a big jump, right? From 30 to 20 to 2.
I know. And you would think that if they're trying to get more audience on the platform and videos more engaging, that would be multiplied more in order to incentivize people to, post that sort of content. So that's weird that it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So the image and video, and that one makes sense. I would think that'd be even higher, but they're basically saying like, look, if you have an image or a video, the algorithms, without even being able to see what the image or video is, we're going to give that a 2x chance because text with an image or a video tells a more full, richer story with different types of media. So it makes sense. I thought it would be higher, but it makes sense. So getting follows from your tweet, that's a 4x. Again, that makes sense. Like you've added people to your following. I'm still a little shocked that it wouldn't be closer to likes and retweets that seem way stratospheric right now. 4x, that's so likes are 7 times more than the followers, right? Which seems high to me, but they've had these algorithms a long time. I guess there's a method to the madness and it makes sense. So if you're commenting on a trending topic, that's a 1.1x. So already we're getting pretty thinly sliced here. So if you're already an influential person and you're hitting on their trending topics, which, sometimes those trending topics are advertised in their promotions, like obviously the NFL's all over that on Sundays, right? So if you hit the trending topic and you got something good to say and you're already kind of influential or have a decent following, you might get shown, and you might get shown on a much higher level to people who don't even follow you. If you have a verified account, that's a 1x, and when he says 1x, I think it means like it doubles your chances. That doesn't mean anything below 1x is less than, or you're multiplying it by like a percentage. So verified account, that helps too. So those are the biggies. And then a lot of things fall under account reputation. And one of them, interestingly, is your follower ratio. So if you have 1,000 followers and you follow 10,000 people, that looks like you're trying to scrape for followers, and they don't like that. They want your ratio to be more people are following you than you follow, because they figure you're more influential that way. So again, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're 1,000 and 1,000, does that hurt you a ton? I don't know. The more you have a smaller following and they align, it probably means you're using it more to like communicate with friends or a team, or you're probably using it for different niche, different reasons.
Totally.
But so a lot of things fall into reputation. If you've ever been banned before, there's a bunch of pieces there, but those are the biggies.
And you got all this from the open source, or?
Yeah, so it's actually on GitHub. They put the whole thing on GitHub, and there are a couple things that are hidden. The full secret sauce isn't there, but most of it, I mean, this is kind of what people would want to see. So I definitely give Elon kudos for saying, like I said, I do it, and here it is, and I did it, and if he withheld a couple things, that's not a big deal. I mean, in the SEO world, Google, how they rank websites, like it is completely a black box. Now, obviously, smart people have tried to reverse engineer and done a good job at it. And even Google will give you directionally, but I don't think anything like this, because, if you do it, we'll talk in a second about kind of the pitfalls. So you've got the boost multipliers, the life of an influencer. What do you know before you get into the tweet? Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. Maybe you're going to get to this, and that'd be great. But the likes, that's pretty passive, right? Like you're just, as you said, like it's more instinctive. Like, hey, I'll click. And a retweet is, almost like a validation of what someone was saying. They're like, yeah, I really stand behind this. You should check it out as well. Where do like the comments and the interactions with it, which I guess is what you're getting at. I want to see how they kind of weigh, the reply guy stuff, right? Like, cause you see that on Twitter all the time, like, hey, I'm a reply guy. And this is the way to get there. And I don't see replies on there or interactions.
Yeah. Replies are I don't know why it wasn't in there, but it's like a 1 or 2x. It was not even a lot at all. Yeah, that was just an omission, but the replies was way less than I thought. And I swear at some point I heard that replying to all your tweets was important. And I think it still is in many instances, because a tweet shelf life has about 6 hours to kind of show itself. So if you're, like me, sometimes wake up super early in the morning and you're posting it at 5 a.m, well, the West Coast may never even have a chance to see it. So probably not the best time to post. I know from a past life and a past job, like 11 o'clock, whatever time you're in is a good one. But, it really just depends on, you've gotten through your morning workload, you get a little break, and then you're going to check out Twitter. But yeah, the replies wasn't as high. So it's important from a engagement standpoint and from connecting with those folks. But yeah, it wasn't nearly as high as I thought. This feels way more rudimentary than I would have thought. I thought if people replied to you, a reply instead of being super low, like a 1 or 2 would be much higher. And your reply to that reply and creating conversations with good quality dialogue would be super important. But, you're kind of hitting on some of the conclusions already, but it's not as important. So that shows you what the influencers have to do. So basically, when you have tweets, you should be encouraging. These are kind of the green light things that help you and the things that good influencers will do. So you encourage engagement, just like with YouTube, please subscribe, please like this video if you liked it, right? But with Twitter, like, hey, retweet it, like it, whatever, like you are obviously encouraged to do that. And that is, I didn't put it in here because it's such a smaller one, but they actually, when you ask people to retweet and stuff, that actually is a slight boost signal. which is
Really?
interesting. Yeah. So encouraging is a boost signal. Again, now we're in the smaller stuff, the day-to-day stuff that you're going to be doing. I already touched on this, know the right time to tweet. So that's super important because we know we have like a 6-hour half-life, right? It doesn't go away after 6 hours, but they're going to, depending on the news, depending on the news that's going on in the day, like you're going to get buried fast. Twitter, moves fast and is very topical. So here's a very interesting thing. So, obviously the Twitter sphere we're both in is the crypto sphere, right? So, and it probably even gets sliced more than that, like Ethereum or NFTs. And so you need to be tweeting within the group that you're a part of, that they have kind of lumped you in. And, there's no easy way to find that. But, if you're on Twitter, you know probably what group you're in. Is it soccer/football? Is it, crypto? Is it politics? So within the grouping, so the point is though, if you start talking about things outside of that, like if we're in crypto and we also have our little side cooking vibe, that doesn't do as well. And you get kind of penalized for that. So, you could do it, but do it at
your own peril.
You're incentivized to do it more sparingly, right? So, the whole point of showing this is to show kind of like the reason the golden bird cage is there is because you're slowly trained, if you get into this, to do these things. Another one, repurpose old content. So if you had a really, you look at your analytics, you had a successful tweet, you write a nice long thread, or now you don't need to write threads. You just write a super long post and, it doesn't matter what your character count is. If you had a good one in the past, you can repurpose that, retweet it and have a different take on it. And you notice like 6529, a lot of these influencers are doing this all the time now. In fact, they're repurposing multi-threads. And I will say in many cases, it's not just clickbait. It's often fairly useful. If I miss stuff or grouping tweets with it's a clever way to do it. And if done right, it actually is effective. So again, it kind of makes sense.
Wouldn't you think that bookmarks would get weighted really high?
Bookmarks were on there. It was definitely one of the lower ones. We'll put it in the 1x range. Yeah. And like, think about it, like sharing with someone else from DMs. I think that is more in the 1 to 2 in the single digit X range. So really likes, I mean, if you have one takeaway here, like right within your industry and go for likes, right?
Yeah. So no wonder people do, GIFs and memes and the polls and, things, because polls are pretty easy to, say I vote here, and give it a like. So
polls are very easy, and polls are positive signal boost. Again, I didn't put every single thing, but surveys are in the single digit, the 1 or 2x, because surveys, they're effective. And like you said, it's basically one sentence question and up to 4 answers and away. So they will give you a slight boost to those as well.
Okay.
So those are all the pieces. Now we're getting into the things you don't want to do. So there's the positive reinforcement of gaining followers and getting more likes and retweets. And then there's the bad stuff. So if your tweet is reported, as you can imagine, like, especially if you get multiple people, that's a minus 700x. So if someone clicks that little red flag in your tweet and says, hey, this is inappropriate or spam, and that makes sense, right? Because they're, negative 700 to me is almost like hit the brakes as fast as you possibly can, because it might be horrible. So, think about how that could be gamed from your, I don't want to say enemies, but your competitors. They could like negative report it. And, I'm sure after a while you'd have to almost have spam accounts to do it, but things can always be gamed on all sides. But a reported tweet totally makes sense, until you start thinking about how things can be gamed. So this one is probably good. This is what everyone used to do. Like now some of our peers are doing on Facebook, like multiple hashtags to be like, it's, if we know it's cringe, it's also cringe theirs. But one strategically placed hashtag that's very apropos. So like when we did our Azuki show, if you just do hashtag Azuki and it's very fitting, that one is a positive, but multiple is a negative because obviously the algorithm's going to be like, it's spam.
Wow. It's almost, I don't know. It's just, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around having to play the game within the algorithm in order to have a voice. And I don't know, I would probably say, and I'm out on a limb with this, that out of kind of the major new school Web3 social media platforms, that you would think that X is kind of the least centralized, but there's still motivating specific behavior. And in that's has a very centralized feel, right? Like, hey, you got to we're going for likes over here. Let's do it, baby. And that's what we're going to boost. And it's a little unsettling to kind of see all this. It's incredibly interesting to me, but part of me is just like, oh, really? So there's rules of the road. And
well, remember, Twitter is the open source one. Again, kudos to Elon for sharing this with us, because remember the goal of the platform is obviously, for the owners, for Elon and whoever else is investing, is to make money,
right?
But it's also to perpetuate and to grow the use and the popularity of the platform. So all of these, when looked at one by one on surface level, totally makes sense. Again, I would think replies would be stronger too over likes, but if you think about it from the 30,000 foot level, it totally makes sense to be likes. Like if someone likes it, their brain it's right away, you don't think, and you just like it. So they're looking for those before judgment could come in, and the conversations back and forth does, obviously I get a lot of value in conversations back and forth, both personally with connecting with people, but also some of the best comments, if you sort through all the spam and all the negative fuddy comments, are some of the best, most insightful stuff comes from the comments and the conversation that ensues there. So it is a factor. It does help, but it's an amplitude lower than you would think it would be.
I think that what I'm getting is like, I would think that likes are almost like the most superficial, kind of engagement, right? Like, as you said, it's almost, I like it. So
if you're sure, like it. Oh, you're my friend. Like, think about it. You're biased towards your friends. Like, go ahead.
No, it only helps, or it obviously serves to build influencers who already have a market, to be able to get the likes, and it doesn't really encourage more deep divey and, niche stuff, where I thought that if you provided more kind of, things that make you go, and think about stuff, that would be more valued. But, if I was just caring about, engagement on X, then I'd be doing memes and GIFs and whatever it is. It's just kind of, oh, that's nice. I like it. Click,
Yeah. And the memes and GIFs, obviously it can't just be total throwaway, but if it's very apropos to, crypto, and you notice that's what a lot of the big folks have gotten. So I think it's hard. There's like an exit velocity, right? It's very hard to get, a lot of people in crypto, if they've joined different NFT communities, especially on the NFT side, you got 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 followers, but to get that exit velocity at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 and above, it's very difficult. And the more you have, the more you have. So success breeds success. Because, if you have 100,000 followers, if you grow up by 10% with your reach, that's 10,000 followers. But if you have 100 followers, that's 10 followers, right? So it's like compounding interest. And when it's so low, it's just like you almost have to make the decision do I go for it or do I not? Because, it goes right back to the first thing I put up there, consistency. It's 2 to 4 tweets a day. Like, you gotta, and there's all sorts of tools to help you with tweets. Obviously we have AI now, and you have systems where you can just plug in your tweets and you can keep it filled for a week while you're on vacation, as long as you're not doing super cutting edge news that's happening day to day, but you can always fill those in from your phone anywhere. So there are tools to do that, but it's after a while, I think it turns into a grind. Yeah. So interacting with low quality accounts, that's a no brainer. Like, if you're spammy and you're interacting with spammy, you're going to become invisible. Unfollows, mutes, and blocks on your account. So if you get too controversial, you might get unfollowed, muted, blocked, and that's obviously a very negative indicator as well. Here's a big one, and for us, we're trying to have this nuance in these deep dives on all sorts of topics with decentralization. If you send an outbound link to your podcast or to YouTube, you get clipped. So you're good. That's a negative factor. So drop my pen. One smart thing that someone said is, in the first tweet, you put a picture. So, hey, we have a podcast. It's on decentralization and music. It's a beautiful picture or thumbnail of it. Then you reply to yourself with the link. Okay. And so will that work? I don't know, but it sounds like that's the more clever way to do it. Because I knew links had a negative, and this is part of the reason I wanted to see it. Like, I want both of us to build this audience organically, and anyone who's putting out content wants to build organically, but you don't want to make some silly mistake that you're just invisible. So that's one that was the most, is the best lesson for us, right? Only URL, just if you just post a URL, Twitter has no context for that, right? So it's harder for the algorithms, so that they lower the boost on that one right away. And image only, because they're probably not using AI to decipher what every meme and image are. So if you do a meme, you got to have a little bit of context there, or that will get lowered as well. So a lot of factors that lower your engagement too. So again, you've got the little bird in the cage, the door is wide open, but you get on a treadmill and you can see all these things you have to think about. And at first you might resist, but when I researched this, it's funny because it was from the standpoint of like, how does it work? But you can imagine every post out there was how to hack or game the system, how to gain more traction. So they were obviously looking at it, how to benefit someone who wants to grow their audience there. And, we're looking at it from a more altruistic, agnostic, like how much are we trapped in these centralized cages? One would argue that X is more decentralized, or at least allows more opinions than some of the other social media, but it's still owned by a person, and it's very centralized. It's very centralized. And it raises the question with like Twitter. Think of all the influencers in crypto, like 99% of them who I find extremely annoying. There's some good ones out there. There's some great ones out there, but most of them I've muted or most likely blocked because they're shilling stuff. And we know that a lot of them work together. So think about how the bigger you get, you can easily get in a Discord club that, you're promoting things together and you're pumping things together. It's not difficult to do, and you're just feeding right in the algorithm, and you already have the big following. So success begats success, and success kind of begats like I want to say corruption, but collusion to make more money based on your audience.
Wow, this is phenomenal. Like, we're gonna have to talk after the show, because pretty much everything I'm doing does not follow this. And,
I think most people, because we're not trying to be influencers, but we want to have a bigger reach. So it's like, I think at some point you have to decide, like, just like with NFTs, like what kind of collector am I? Like, what kind of social media poster do I want to be? Where am I willing to play the game, and where am I not willing to play the game? because I'm a firm believer, most social media firms, if you pay someone to do it, the ones who know what they're doing have massive followings. They can make their money directly from products or from these rings. They don't need you. So the agencies they're not super influential. They're just more like PR agencies, or like, hey, I tweeted for you, and they might know some of these practices, but and if they do know what they're doing, it'd be expensive.
And also, they don't. When you outsource it, they're not representing necessarily your brand and your thought and what you're doing. So you kind of give away, some of the authenticity. And that's kind of the central question. Like, how true do you want to be being authentic to you? Or
right.
How do you want to, play by the rules in order for more people to be exposed to what you're doing if you're proud of what you're doing? So it's a conundrum. And I think that, moving forward, I think it'd be really interesting to look at, do some of these dives on some of the newer platforms, because I know that you got me looped in on Farcaster, and it feels different. And maybe the metrics that they're looking at in terms of, the boost multipliers and things like that are inherently different. It does seem like there is an opportunity to, kind of create a new, more altruistic, I don't even know if that's the right term there necessarily, but kind of a different metric in terms of building a platform.
Maybe more decentralized. And we will definitely get to Farcaster, and huge shout out to Farcaster, because it's built, its algorithms are different. It's trying to build more on commenting on other people's posts. So already there's a different vibe there, and that's why it feels different to you. And, obviously that can be gamed as well. And there are certain people who are kind of on the automatic follow list, because Farcaster, as if you're small, you have to make sure people are following the right people with the right type of content. So especially when you have a smaller ecosystem, the good news is it's all around, I would say, VCs, crypto, it's more technology. So it's got one field covered well, but Twitter has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of categories. But Farcaster has done an awesome job. I find myself spending more and more time there because the dialogue that I get and some of the insight I get, it's not all great and perfect, but it's far better and feels far less spammy than X does now. So interestingly, to kind of close this out, this is an interesting thought exercise. So there was a study done.
Okay. Neutral
language gets less interaction than, so now we're not in the algorithms here. We're in humanity, people. What do they want? So neutral language gets less interaction, and emotional, often negative language gets way more interaction and retweets, and we look at the 30x for likes, 20x for retweets. Remember that 20x is still probably as or more valuable than a 30x like, because remember, the retweet then gets
the audience.
It gets the new audience, right? So the emotional negative language and emotional positive language helps too, but unfortunately a lot of the negative language gets tweeted even more. So just based on humanity and having that emotional charge, especially if you're plugged into that, you're gonna get more emotional and you're gonna tweet it more, almost like we were saying with the likes, before your brain even has a chance to think about it. You're like, like retweet, let's get this out to even more people, and obviously that can be good for good things, but can also be, if there's misinformation, that can be a horrible thing. And it certainly, think about how it trains the influencer. Like now look at the flywheel. It's kind of scary.
And look at this, and just, looking at what, right, like today we're, 350 days away from an election. So just imagine how that's going to get ramped up in the space, and
So, but just like for this show, the more we know, we're doing this research for us anyway, and it's interesting, but we want all of our listeners to know too. And some people have probably already read this, but I think a lot of people would be surprised, especially when you add that emotional on top of it what's important. So these influencers, even if they resist a bunch of these, after a while, especially if you can make a living off this, of course you're going to stick to emotional and images and
Yeah.
all these things. And some of these things are they're like an image, like, yeah, of course adding an image would make sense, but like being emotional negative, now we're getting into like why with the last election cycle or 2 cycles ago, why it got so inflammatory on so many different sides, because they tapped into something, that
Well, yeah.
that was very primal.
Yeah. And not negative behavior, but negative behavior is reinforced, right? So I won't say negative, I'll say divisive, right? Like, so polarizing and divisive material is more sticky in that respect, and it caters to, if I feel very vehement one way or the other on a certain topic and I see something, the retweet is like my vehicle to kind of fight for my side and get it out to more
Right.
people, and that's getting 20x. So wow, it's interesting to
Yep.
see how the sausage is made here for sure.
Yeah. So that's why, people feel like they're trapped, and not to add another layer, but
Oh gosh.
now, well, think about it. You're within your tweet group. You're doing this emotional language. You're forming also, which we've heard about a lot in social media, these echo chambers, right? So are you going to tweet things or go against the grain of your tribe? So obviously in the NFT world, within that you have Azuki, you have the Bored Apes, you have the Punks, you have so many different ones, Miladies, and they all have kind of their different vibe, and they all have, the thought leaders or the influencers even within that. Like,
Yeah.
you're probably, that's why, like when Azuki did something big, like to even now to go against that grain was, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I'm a little older. It's easier for me, but that's why a lot of people aren't necessarily going to speak out, because it might negatively affect them within the crew. Now, I think this last drop, a lot more people spoke out, but I think a lot of people spoke out, spoke their piece. And then I don't want to say they got right back in line, but they, because they might have just seen all the positive things, but they got right back in line, because a lot of their friends and a lot of the people they've been online with for now years, or at least 19, 20 months now, are also there. Like, at the end of the day, if the price is low, you're going to lose money. You might as well stick around for the experience and the story, which, and the art, which is great. So
Yeah. So there's hierarchies within the subsets within, so it is. And, you also don't want to, if you understand this at all, you don't want to alienate anyone who could be a potential easy like, right? Like, so you don't want to, get
exactly.
someone mad when it's like, no, actually, I want you guys to throw some likes my way because now it's 30x. Like, wow.
I know. So the big question to kind of finish with on this section is, so obviously we said, like, there's no one to blame here. The Twitter X is the biggest, call it town square app that there is, and it has to sustain itself. I mean, Elon paid a lot of money, took out a lot of debt to buy that. So he only has a choice but to grow it for he and his investors. So from our standpoint, or any of our listeners who are, they'd like to, when they say something, carve out a little niche, how do you stay true, nuanced, and authentic, but also be able to fly out of the cage when you want to?
I mean, that's right there. That's an encapsulation of what is at the mission, in my mind, of this program and of this show. It is not saying we're going to have the 360 answer to something, but we're going to consider and continue to consider with an element of critical thinking, why am I doing this, or why would I do this? And is it in line with being authentic to what we want to add to the ecosystem and the greater world, right? Like, how where do we fit into this, and how much do we want to play, or do we not want to play? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Like, what's the upside? So so I have a verified account and, all this. I don't see a lot of upside from some of that, so a lot of this, I'm not seeing a ton of benefit. And do you want to, kind of fall in line? I'm not sure, but it sure as heck helps to understand the ingredients to the dish that you're sitting there mindlessly eating. And that to me, if we can continue to look at things from that lens and that perspective, that's what's going to continue to have me be really pumped and excited about where Decentralized Dawn can go and where it can take us. So for me as a co-host and a partner to be, okay, I didn't understand any of that, for you to go through the Gemini earn kind of process with me and be like, dude, right. I didn't know that that's how it went. Like, that's the sort of conversations that I think we need to have. And I need to process this and, kind of come up with, what action steps, so to speak, would come of this. But it's just information that I hadn't had presented in this way, yet it's impacting how I live my life. So it's very, there's a lot to noodle on there for sure.
Oh, for sure. And, I've when I comment, is I do comment on a lot of posts, and often I'll take like if I agree with them, I'll like it, or if I love it, I'll just retweet it, right? But if I agree with some nuance, then I'm going to say that. And that kind of goes, like, that honest dialogue kind of goes against the flywheel here, right? And some people, it's funny because obviously you can't get tone and from text, right? And often if you're in a bad mood, you read an email, you're like, why are they so angry? And the person writing it was not angry at all. They were just being direct, and you're how you feel inherits your tone. A lot of people will be like, dude, like, relax. Like, I'm on your side. I'm like, oh, I'm not angry at you. I'm just saying a counterpoint or something that should be thought about. To me, this is honest, nuanced dialogue. And some of these people either ignore it or are taken aback by it. And now that we've looked at all, call it 25 of these main factors here, now we know why, because the algorithm gears them and nudges them and has trained them and conditioned them over time to use it and take advantage of all of its aspects.
And and just to put the last take on it, it's interesting to kind of think, is it really the town square? Because is, dialogue really encouraged, or is it more, continued alignment with, kind of your subgroup and, a surface level like or a retweet, or these guys are, it's emotional and negative language. But it's on my side, so I'll do that. Like, is there room for, or does anyone even want, kind of a counterpoint to continue the critical thinking side of it, to continue the nuance? Or is that kind of just a convenient way to position a platform? Like, it's the town square for everything. Like,
yeah, it's not. And I would say it doesn't feel like it's encouraged right now. And the people with the biggest megaphones, the good news is now it's not, 3 TV stations or even just cable where it's one way and reading the newspapers and kind of having your opinions formed there. I think with COVID, we've all learned that we have to be way more discerning in how we take in information and how we process it, right? So I think this is just another piece, and it will be interesting to see how we change our behavior from this, or we don't. Because I think it's okay to play a game, but you've got to be honest with yourself and not fall down some sort of slippery slope, and be honest and true to your ideals. And the beauty now is we have more options. At first it was just MySpace and then Facebook, and now we have a ton of centralized options, but now we're starting to get into, with Farcaster and Noster, which we'll cover later, into these decentralized ones. And this is going to be a fun journey to see where that takes us, and our mainstream folks, are they never going to care really or think this much about it? And a lot of us who got in early will be over there in the decentralized world. Like it makes an interesting argument. Like, could a more bifurcated world happen where there's kind of the decentralists with, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or just like main crypto chains as kind of their main form of currency versus fiat and state run and government? And can there be two systems, or does fiat hold on for absolute dear life? It's fascinating.
Yeah. There's, I think this is an example of, I don't think we're going to run out of things that we can discuss and that we could take this lens to. And I appreciate, you doing the research and kind of putting this all together, because as I say, I got a couple key big kind of ahas and takeaways from that. And I appreciate it. And it's going to inform and impact, how I and we, decide to move forward in some of our strategies and expectations too. Because if you're doing, like, if you're trying to create art or you're trying to create content or do this or that, and you're not making it to get a quick like or something, then you sure can't get too upset if you're not getting quick likes or a ton of engagement, because you're not creating something that makes sense for that. So I sure don't want to truncate, the opportunity to create something just because it doesn't fit in that, I guess, is kind of my takeaway. So that was great for me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to moving forward and seeing more, in upcoming episodes. Really quick, just kind of move along. One of the things we wanted to maybe talk about, and this isn't a big, long segment or feature, but just kind of follow up and updates from some of the past shows. And I will say that one thing I've seen on my timeline recently, and it's been kind of reaffirming, I guess, in a way, is it seems like there's a lot more people starting to talk about the value of purely on-chain NFTs. But I think I saw a clip of Elon talking about, if it's an NFT, if it's on-chain, is it really, or is it just, a PFP that's pointed, so
right.
Just for the audience, take a listen or a view of the show we did, NFTs, built on quicksand, and take a look at that, because we spent some time kind of walking through that. And I know that I had a ton of knowledge gained just by looking at that. And now I do view, that differently. And it's interesting to kind of see that start taking hold. And I wonder if that really will be one of the primary, mechanisms of judgment of, what's valued moving forward for, digital art and things.
Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure. And it's interesting. Bankless just did something on it too, like 2 weeks after our show. And I used to do some work with the rug and writing comedy for the Bankless DAO. So, I know some people there, but it is interesting. We're so small now, I don't want to take credit for it, but at the same time, I think we're definitely hitting on the zeitgeist of where people are thinking and looking, and it's cool. I mean, it makes you realize that A, this is interesting to us anyway, but B, we're on the right track. So,
and then I had one more little follow up from the music episode we did, Music Unchained. And I did get an email yesterday from the folks at Royal telling me that the next royalty round for Diplo's Don't Forget My Love is available. So it is believe me, it's not life-changing money by any means, but it is a sign that sort of program and platform can work, and that we really could be looking at the development of a new asset class and, a new annuity system. And that's kind of awesome when you buy an NFT because you like the song or you like the art, and then, you check your mailbox and it's like, oh, I'm getting paid for this in perpetuity. Like, I used to be friends with a bunch of actors and stuff, and that was always the thing in Hollywood. Like, they'd go down and check the mail, and, they get residual checks, and it's such a foreign concept if you're not in that space, but
right.
People rely on it. So that was kind of validating to see that continuing on through everything.
So Diplo already had done one or a couple of these immutable releases where you own a piece of the song, and you're saying the fact that he's coming back for more. Like he's in. He loves this style of splitting some of the creativity and some of the profits with
Well,
the fan base.
well, I don't know that necessarily as much as I know that whatever the smart contract that I have that has me be a, gold holder of the
Sure.
song is that I'm going to always get my share of that 8% of the streaming royalties for as long as the song's played. So buying that NFT, 6 months ago, a year ago, I'm continuing to at least get residual income from that. And that's, a pretty impressive use case for,
Got it. Got it. Got it. Yep.
well, like it's working, and
Super
that
cool.
can only progress. Um, I don't know. We've been through a lot on this show. I feel like we've covered quite a bit. I don't know. I started off, in the beginning saying something good, and I'd love if we could, kind of end on that. If there's anything, Chicago, that, maybe striking a tone with you or something that you'd want to share as we kind of look to wrap up this.
Yeah. Start positive, end positive. I love it.
Yeah.
So we took one of our children out with her friends for Halloween last night and walked around. And in Chicagoland, it was like 29 degrees and snowing sideways. It was actually, it's stuck on the ground this morning. It was quite beautiful, but it was freezing walking around last night. So the girls, being a little older, they're not small anymore. I could barely keep up with them in the wagon, with all their stuff and their candy. They're flying around. But the highlight for me is there's a young girl in our town, and I might get verklempt because it's beautiful. But she lost her mom when she was real little when we first moved here, and she always was very quiet and always was very guarded and just.
Yeah.
It was obviously very difficult, losing a mother in your toddler years. I can't even imagine. But last night, I heard like, "Hey, Mr. Chicago. Hey, Mrs. Chicago." And we look around, we have a small town. We know most of the people here. And it was her, and she and her high school friend, this is years later. She just had a big smile on her face, and we had a little chat with her and just kind of looked at each other, and we're just, our hearts melted, because just to see a child who we know has suffered so much, just to see the joy on them was beautiful. So
Yeah,
it was, it gave me perspective that, life is short, and seeing a child happy, there's nothing greater.
and just seeing resilience, and seeing people being able to experience joy even after living through tragedy that's what it's all about, man. So
Yeah.
I don't know what else we can say on that. That's an incredible way to end the show. And, I hope that everyone is enjoying potentially the new format. And I know that, we'll be back next week. So I guess I'll hit a quick disclaimer. As always, this show is for entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to do your own research and, never invest more than you can afford to lose in the crypto ecosystem. And on that note, I just want to wish everybody the best. Until next time.
Take care all. Later.